Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Very interesting panel. And I hope those who are going to Glasgow are going to make sure that that climate justice becomes reality. We want you to come with real transfer technology agreement on how we mitigate what has already happened. I think we have to force those who are responsible for most of the emissions to make sure that we get fair treatment. The UN recognizes the concept of equal but differentiated responsibility. They must make sure that that technology transfer doesn't come at the expense of poor countries because they caused the challenges that we are facing. I'm going to give Rekhosofetsi just 1 minute to say something about his session. If Rekhosofetsi is here, he was a moderator for one of the sessions. Unfortunately, we've lost our moderator for the other session who had to go and teach. Rekhosofetsi, are you with us?
I am with you and I hope I am audible.
Yeah.
I am happy that he is teaching and I do not have to teach right now because I would not want to miss this particular conference. Our panel and our session focused on understanding Pan-Africanism in a digitalizing world and the fourth IR. And we had two amazing panelists in Dr. Karuri, Gechi Karuri Sabina, as well as Dr. Clifford Imani in particular. And both of them talked about the need for us, when we think about digitalizing the world, around this idea of how do you create an imagination of what the world could be without also being trapped by the idea of rapid technological change, the belief that simply because the fourth IR is hitting us so quickly does not mean that we must rush with it, that we must actually slow down and think about the types of interventions that we should make to make sure that we create the right sorts of tipping points for change for society. A lot of the topics focused on this idea of how do you balance reforms around the idea of discovery and creation using technology, the belief that in order to create Pan-African links between countries, there's a need for countries to start collaborating with each other, to start thinking about how can we leverage each other's technologies in order to create these types of changes that we want. There were other numerous points here that we will also put into a final document at the end of the conference. But I think the 3 points that I want to put here was at least one particular point from Yechikuru Sabina around the idea that of literacy, that when we talk about digitalization in fourth IR, there is this balance between how do you democratize this type of change, right, without being controlled by it. So she made a big point about that, about making it accessible to as many people as possible. Demonetizing equals the ability to democratize the advent of technology. And I think one last important point that she made was that technology in of itself is not prejudiced or racist or discriminatory. It is the intent of the people who use that technology, and that it is the people who need to have the right intent in leveraging technology. Otherwise, people will use it in a way against others. And it's the idea of how do you own this technological revolution. So I've got pages of notes here that we can't get through all here. And we'll try and make sure that the presentations are shared to the delegates because I thought they were quite interesting as well.
Thank you very much, Rekhosofetsi. I think in wrapping up this session, the session was about economic matters. Most of you would know that the wage gap, for instance, the wealth gap in the US is, if you look at white families, their wealth is almost 10 times that of black families. This is a global problem. You look at the UK, same problem. You look at the mainland where we are in the majority as black people. But because of all these issues that we're raising, extractive industry and all of that, studies show that Africa exports more capital than it receives. In the last few years, we've exported about 80 billion a year, which is more than the aid that Africa receives. And these are real figures. And so it's a net export of capital to wealthy countries. So that one is an African mainland program, but the solution lies elsewhere because that wealth goes somewhere. But also when you look, as I said, the diaspora, we find that the wage gap reflects this disparity between black and white. And it's something that I hope that this economic session has thrown light on, and that we will jointly work on between the mainland and the diaspora. And I mean everyone in the Pacific, everyone in Europe, everyone in Asia, all our colleagues in Europe, in the US, in Latin America. I mean, my last comment is that South Africa hosted a conference on racism, xenophobia, and all forms of discrimination, and which we're celebrating 10 years since the conference was held. And at the conference, we wanted to find out why was South Africa pushed to host this conference. And that time, the president of Brazil was Lula da Silva. So he confessed. I mean, he said, Brazil is not ready to deal with this racism problem because the majority of the population of Brazil is African. But we have not even started opening those wounds to deal with them. So we couldn't host a conference. And the US, we were asked, it was President Clinton, because President Mbeki was asking, why doesn't President Clinton host a conference? And he was like, if you look at the figures in the US, if I say to you, the US has got 2% unemployment, that's a very generic figure. If you disaggregate those figures, you'll find that it's 60% amongst Native Americans, 40% amongst African Americans. So we are ourselves very far from dealing with the race issue. And so my closing remarks is that, as Dubois said, the problem of the 20th century is one of race. It still is in the 21st century. Thank you very much. I hand over to you, Reverend Dr. Angelique. I think you are the one who should close the overall session, or Reverend Chikani.
Well, thank you very much, Advocate. It's such an honor to have you moderating today. We are so grateful for your leadership. And we're grateful to all of our moderators and experts and speakers, and most of all, of course, to everyone who sacrificed time to be here today, to be a part of this journey.